Hello there folks, welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and it is my pleasure to be your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Now today I aim to answer a question from a viewer and offer some options which will help them on their mission to keep a pair of shoes in their collection a little longer. Along the way, I'm going to offer you some reasons why it's important to consider repairing shoes rather than throwing them away and buying new ones. But we'll come to that as we go along. So this question comes from Kevin, and he has said, I have a 30-plus-year-old pair of country brogue shoes I purchased from Hogs of Fife in Scotland. They were branded as Hogs, but I suspect they were made either by Barker or Trickers in Northampton. I'm afraid I was once that guy who only had one decent pair of shoes, and for some years I wore them rather relentlessly. I wore them past the point that I should have sent them to a cobbler for attention. Part of the reason for that is there are no good cobblers in my area. The only local shoe repairer closed down, and I was still a schoolboy. A good while ago, I now have a few pairs of reasonably good shoes. So these shoes we're talking about today have fallen out of my shoe rotation. Your recent shoe videos have prompted me to contact Trickers. They haven't confirmed that these shoes are theirs, but they have said they could refurbish them for £200. I have two questions. Firstly, do you believe these shoes are worth spending the £200 on? They are rather of their time and have a more squared off toe than would be seen today. They are yesterday's fashion. That's not worth spending money on, rather than a timeless classic that will repay the investment. What are your thoughts? Secondly, I've been thinking about getting a new pair of dress boots for the coming autumn-winter, and £200 would go a long way towards that, especially on the pre-owned market. I live a fairly active country lifestyle and wonder if the money would be better spent on boots or repairing these once beloved shoes. Okay, so that's basically the question. What Kevin is asking here is that this pair of shoes over 30 years old, which he wore really quite heavily, he could send them back to Trickers, who've said they'll refurbish them for £200. And basically Kevin is saying, is it worth that investment? Because these shoes look a little bit out of their era now. Because of various aspects of their appearance. So here are the shoes as we look at them, and I would agree, my first thought when I saw them, they drip probably Trickers DNA. However, they've got that sort of country full wingtip brogue look to them, which I really find enjoyable and beautiful to look at myself, because living an active country lifestyle myself, this is the perfect shoe to take on the world. However, with the changing of the eras and the fashions and the styles, a shoe like this today could easily be worn even in metropolitan London, because this adherence to the old values of wearing only Oxfords and only black shoes in the city, that's long since gone. I think if you wore a country brogue like this, it would fit in pretty much anywhere. So when it comes to the styling, I think the somewhat vintage retro styling of this shoe is not something which should put you off. It does have more of a, I would say, a rounded or squared off toe than one would typically see in a more modern shoe today, but that doesn't mean it is devoid of many attractive features. What I would say is, looking at the shoe, it seems to be in great shape. You talk about having it refurbished by Trickers. When we look at the important aspects of the shoe, the leather in the upper seems to be intact. There's no, yes, there's creasing across the vamp, but that's normal. We all get that. Simply by putting these shoes in a good, tight-fitting shoe tree will make them look so much better, and it may bring some shape back to the shoe. But in addition, the leather looks great. It looks as if it's been well conditioned, and I would think if you just spent a little bit of time on this shoe, maybe getting some saddle soap, getting it fully cleaned off, maybe, then if you wish to, break it down to its basic factory finish by using some cutting agent. There are many different brands out there, but the sapphire versions are very good. Strip away all of that old polish and start again. Or if you just wanted to add to that patina, add some, certainly some shoe conditioner, followed by something else, maybe shoe cream to bring some colour back to it, and finish it off with a bit of polish. And I tell you, I reckon these shoes are going to look great, because The important bits, like the back of the shoe where the heel slides into the shoe, it's fully intact, it's in great condition. And when we look at the sole, yes, there might be a little bit of wearing at the striking point where the heel hits the ground, but in truth, they don't look that bad. You know, the tread on the sole is fully formed. It doesn't look as if it's worn down. These look like they've got a good few years worth of wearing them without actually having any renovation done at all. I think when it comes to refurbishment, what you need to do is visually refurbish them without worrying about the structure of the shoe. If you were to send these shoes back into Trickers, they would strip the sole off, they would replace the cork, probably do something with the lining, give you some new shoelaces and charge you 200 quid for it, which is, you know, a fair price if the shoe was in shocking condition, but these are not. I think if you just followed that process of working on that upper, the leather of the upper, it would bring so much life back to it. Simply by, you know, maybe dampening the shoe down, placing it in a shoe tree so that the shoe, you know, then returns to its original shape. It's going to totally rejuvenate this shoe. It's going to look totally different. And I think that's perhaps the way you may wish to go. But I'll give you a couple of final thoughts at the end. What I'm going to do, first of all, though, is tell you why I think it's really important and a better option to repair your older shoes rather than go out and buy new. Because, you know, if they were built by Barker or Trickers, two of the old traditional shoe companies up in Northampton, they were built with longevity in mind from the get-go. When they were designed and built in that factory 30 plus years ago, at the point of inception, that shoe had the consideration built into it that it could be refurbished and the sole could be replaced up to 3 or 4 times during its lifetime. So quality constructed shoes, I think, are worth preservation, because whatever happens, that shoe, that craftsmanship that went into that shoe, it's dying out. You know, let's be honest, there aren't many factories that make shoes like that anymore, and shoes which have been designed to be repaired are increasingly rare, particularly at any price point. You know, but particularly at a price point which us ordinary guys can afford. So £200, if that shoe was really in a shocking state, you sent it away and they spent £200, you know, you spent £200 and it came back to you, and I've had this done myself with shoes, they come back like new. It's a very sensible investment for what you get back. It's economical to you, and it is also, you get the advantage yourself of being involved in the sustainability circle of life. So you're not throwing those shoes away. You've had them for 30 years now. If you were to have them refurbished, do you know what? You could probably have them for another 30. In most cases, shoes like this, built of this quality, with this consideration of repair at the inception, they can outlive a human lifetime. So think of it like that. And of course, when you have shoes repaired, your cost per wear goes down and down. Whilst £200 sounds steep to have a refurbishment, what you have to remember is that the cost of buying an equivalent pair of shoes to the one that you have there, I'm going to guess, you know, I would say they look like a rough equivalent of the Trickers Stow, or Borton boot, sorry, the Stow is the boot. The Borton would be the shoe version. They're up over £500. So you are looking at a considerable investment. But if you just spend 200 on this pair that you have now, you're going to get a similar outcome. You're going to get a shoe which will have, you know, decades ahead of it, which is not only going to look classy, so your cost per wear goes right down if you have a shoe repaired. And, you know, you get the advantage then as well of walking around in a pair of shoes which are, as you use the word, beloved to you. They are broken in. They are familiar to you. Excuse me. You have built a patina on the leather. These shoes are a part of you. So by having them refurbished, you continue on that journey with that pair of shoes, rather than buying a new pair for which you have to start that journey all over again. And the final reason why I would say it's worth investing in a refurbishment is, let's not forget, you know, a well-loved pair of shoes carries a history with it, as we've kind of just alluded to. But those pair of shoes, you couldn't buy them again. If you went out to purchase a pair of shoes which looked like that, you would never ever find them again, because they've probably long gone out of production decades ago. And that shoe is a part of your life journey, a story. It's a work of art from the past which is with you today, from which you can prolong its life long into the future. And I think when you think of it like that, you couldn't replicate those shoes again. You couldn't find anything like that. I think it also helps justify the spend. If you're trying to weigh up, is the £200 too much? Now, whilst we talk about why I think you should invest in a pair of shoes when it comes to refurbishment, that sustainability circle, on the other hand, it might be time to think about replacing them if you fall into one of these categories. You are right when you say the style has changed. And if the style has changed so much that it no longer suits you or isn't going to look appropriate in the modern world, well, it may be time to let them go and look to something for which that style has now been superseded by. So if that I don't think that toe is particularly too squared off to cause you concern in the style stakes today, but it might be. If the toe was very squared in the style which we saw, in the early 2000s, I would say, yeah, if you don't love the look anymore, if they don't feel good on your feet, it's a fair reason to move on. All right, if the look isn't you, it's in your past. If you have a pair of bright yellow boots and you don't feel like that sort of guy anymore, you're not the bright yellow boot guy, it's time to retire them. The other reason why I would consider throwing them away, and one of the few reasons I would consider throwing them away, is that the uppers are no longer worth saving. So if that leather has cracked, if it's creased to a point that the leather has become dried out, and there is a point where you can tell a shoe is past its best, and I have had shoes like that in my collection. Maybe you've been a little bit reticent in putting conditioning cream on them, and that leather has been maybe stored in a warm environment somewhere, and they've thoroughly dried out. You can tell the leather becomes brittle and crisp. It's just not worth throwing good money after a bad shoe. No cobbler, no shoe repairer is going to be able to rejuvenate leather which is really just thoroughly worn out, cracked and creased and dried out. So move on, get something nice and new, look after it a bit better the next time. And the other thing is really that the shoe is no longer practical in your lifestyle. So I would say the shoes you demonstrated to us, they are certainly shoes which are an outdoor country style. If you no longer were an outdoor country guy, you lived your life exclusively in a metropolitan city, in an urban environment, yeah, maybe that shoe isn't going to fit in with your new lifestyle. So perhaps you would maybe want to get something more fitting, or certainly vice versa. If you're a London guy and you've moved out to the sticks in retirement, so your wardrobe is full of fancy Oxford shoes with cap toe Oxfords and semi-brogues and quarter brogues, or any other, the very stylish shoes that you can get from a lot of the manufacturers these days, they're not going to cut it in a country environment. You don't want a sleek leather-soled shoe in the country. You want something with a bit more ruggedness, a bit of a day-night sole, a commando sole. So if you have moved forwards in your life, let's not throw good money after bad. Go for something which fits your environment. But in direct answer to your question, you have got two options. Number one, I've kind of mentioned it. Take the shoe as it is to a cobbler, maybe get him to sort out the heel. If the heel is worn down a little, that's going to be easy. The addition of a rubber block to the bottom of the heel is going to cost a few pounds. It's not going to cost 200, and you've got a pretty good starting point to go forward. You can get it repaired cheaply, it'll keep that shoe going. Invest a bit of money in some nice polish, some conditioning cream, and it's going to bring it to life. And of course, some shoe trees. And keep the shoes in shoe trees in between your wears. They're going to keep their look. The final option, and this is the one I'm going to recommend to you, all right? This is the one I'm going to pin my colours to the mast. Get something new that you can go forward with for the rest of your life, which you love, which you can be passionate about, which you can wear and make them the special shoes in your life. Now, you mentioned you're looking at boots. You are looking at perhaps something which will be rugged and robust and will do you for the autumn and winter time. And you mentioned also that, that £200 spent on refurbishment could be spent elsewhere. I'm going to say, if you're used to those shoes, you think those shoes are trickers, which they likely are, particularly if trickers have said they'll repair them. I would say, yes, trickers are expensive. A like-for-like replacement, if you were to buy a pair of trickers Stow boots, for instance, straight from trickers or from one of their retail outlets, shall we say Jermyn Street, they're going to cost you, as near as damn it, £600, all right? That's a lot of money. It's a long way north of the 200, which you would spend on refurbishment. Presumably you would like to add a little money to that as well, because 200 is going to buy you virtually nothing unless you're buying second hand. But don't forget there are ways you can buy new, but without, going full retail. Now, if you live in the UK, and I guess you do because you referred to your prices that you were prepared to spend in pound sterling, you could also visit the Trickers factory. Go to Northampton, visit their factory, see what they have in their factory store. Typically, shoes and boots will be about half price, about 45% off the retail price. And you can go in there, you will get a brand new boot from one of the best shoemakers in the world, Royal Warrant holders, for a lot less than the full retail price. That's if you live within a reasonable distance of Northampton, which I'm guessing not everybody does, but Northampton is kind of central in England, so it's fairly close to get to. If you can't make that journey, don't forget, a lot of people don't know this, Trickers run an online factory store. I'm going to put the link to this in the show notes below. I'm not affiliated to Trickers in any way, other than being a personal customer myself. Right? They don't know I often review their products. But if you go to their online factory store, you can get these great prices online, as long as you're pretty happy with the fit. You can order them, they'll send them to you, job done. You don't have to go to the store. I happened to look at their store today in answering your question. And for instance, right, I noted that there is a Trickers Stow country boot with a day-night sole in a beautiful, rich, burnished, mid-brown colour. Should cost, let's have a look, I think it's just under £600. Available on their online factory store for £375. Now, different boots and shoes are always passing through the factory store as they have availability in the factory. But let's be honest, to pick up a shoe like that, I know it's a fair bit north of your £200 you would have spent on refurbishment, but for £375, you're getting an absolutely beautiful boot, timeless elegance, which will last forever. I own a pair of Trickers Malton boots, which is basically this boot but with a commando sole, and I can only sing its praises unreservedly. It's a hell of a shoe manufacturer, and if you were to buy these boots, the reality is they're going to last for the rest of your life. So that would be my preferred option. I hope it has given you some food for thought, and maybe many of you other folks out there have also picked up something useful today. If you have, like the video, subscribe for more. If you'd like to come on the journey with me towards Chap Nirvana and become a better gentleman with me as I strive on that purpose in life, you can become one of my patrons. The link to my patron pages are below. For a tiny monthly fee, you will benefit from the extra exclusive videos which I make only for my patrons on that platform. I'd love to have you on the journey with me. So until the next time, folks, take care, and I'll see you again very soon.